Hey everyone, Casey Scanlon here, bringing you another Lake of the Ozarks Fishing Report. It's Christmas Eve, and the fish have been really biting here at the lake. It's starting to feel like winter. We had, a really long fall where it almost felt like summer a lot of the time, and the water temperatures stayed really warm. So now we're starting to get into those, mid 40 to 50 degree water temps, and the fish are really starting to feed up for winter. It doesn't really matter what species you're targeting. They're biting, and the size has really increased the last couple weeks. So my guide trips have been a little bit slow. I've got a lot of open dates available, and it looks like we've got some really good weather headed our way. So that should, keep a lot of us anglers out there on the water, and these fish are going to continue to bite all winter, and they're going to stay in relatively the same locations here for a few months. So fishing's starting to get good. The water temperature, like I said, is anywhere from like low 40s I've seen all the way up to about 50 degrees. So if you're near Bagnell Dam on the lower end of the lake where there's a lot of deep clear water, those water temperatures are a little bit higher. It's going to be anywhere from that 47 to 51 degree water temperature. As you go into shallower water, so let's just say you're going into the backs of a big creek off the main lake, it's going to get progressively colder as you go further back into the creek, into that shallower water. Same way with the bigger creek arms like the Glaze or Niangua or the main Osage. Those are going to typically run colder. Just a lot of shallow water. That shallow water on those really cold nights, kind of drops really quickly. So, and in turn, you get a bunch of warm days and it heats up really good too. But the water temperatures, basically just a little bit colder, lower 40s in some of the upper reaches of some of the creek arms and rivers here at the lake. So water temperature is good. Really don't be scared of that cold water temps. If you see them, it's about getting around the fish. So those fish love to bite when the water's in the 40s, and that's what we got around most of the lake. So whether you're targeting crappie, bass, white bass, hybrids, you can do it all right now, have a lot of fun and catch quite a few fish. But, numbers have still been down a little bit, but the size overall has been really, really good. So the crappie population, really surprised. They were kind of stingy all summer, but tons of big crappie in the lake right now. We were catching a lot of those, 10, 11 inch crappie the last few years, which make great table fare. But now we've got a lot of those 13 and 14 inch crappie in the lake. Actually, most of the crappie I've been catching have been that bigger size. So I'm gonna get out there after Christmas and try to target a few more of those because really fun to catch. And right now is honestly the best time to come out here and crappie fish. All the way now until they spawn. A lot of guys want to come in late spring when the fish are starting to spawn, but that's a short time frame where they actually get up there and get on the bank and are easy to catch. And sometimes they're not that easy to catch, but right now, lots of big groups of fish out there, and it's just starting to get really good. So crappie fishing is going to be fantastic for the next few months. White bass feeding really heavily on flats, the backs of creeks, main lake, shallow main lake stuff, main lake points with wind blowing on them, anywhere that creates kind of a feeding opportunity. But flats are a really good place to work, to look for them. Jerk baits, small crankbaits, rooster tails, the Alabama rig has been really, really good. You can do a little bass fishing and catch some of those big hybrids and whites on that Alabama rig. As far as the crappies go, they're pretty predictable too. They're around brush piles, both shallow and deep. Big docks on the main lake, big docks on secondary points, even some wave breaks, anywhere that creates a lot of shade, anywhere that's got a lot of cover, whether it's cable systems on big docks or, the shade of the dock itself or a big brush pile. A lot of those, big, tall brush piles that are in deep water are going to harbor a ton of fish. But I've been catching a lot of bigger fish around some of those smaller piles, less than 10 feet deep. They're going to have fewer fish in them, but a lot of those crappies are those, 14 to 12 inch size so those are, fun to catch. Those are the ones that we like to target. So the bigger crappie are a little more isolated. Some of those bigger groups don't have quite the size in them, but certainly the ones I like to target on guide trips, or if I'm going out to, eat a bunch of crappie, I like to stop around those big groups, try to get them fired up, and hopefully you can put a limit in the boat pretty quickly. So, but let's talk about the bass fishing. Fished some tournaments recently, had a little bit of success in those. But the bite has been really pretty simple as far as baits, baits and locations go. The baits, jerk bait, jig, Alabama rig, a little bit of a crankbait bite. So rock crawlers, wiggle warts, flat-sided crankbaits have been good. Something that's going to get down there. Some days they get up real shallow, where something in that 4 to 6 foot range works extremely well, but most of the days they're kind of off of that drop, just off the bank a little bit in that 8 to 12 foot range. So you want to have a crankbait that's going to get down there and hit the bottom of that 8 to 10 foot preferably. But colors, on the crankbaits, water's clear here. We've got some stained water, but for the most part, the water that I've been seeing has been pretty clear. And I've fished all the way up to, let's just say, about the 50-mile marker here the last couple weeks. So fished a lot of the lake, and a lot of it's relatively clear. But here we got a rock crawler. This is just a red color. And I was throwing that yesterday, actually, in some really clear water, and they seemed to like it. We had a cloudy day yesterday. But this color, I've got a handful of them here. We've got this one, got still a lot of red in it, but a little bit more of that phantom look or clear kind of body. Some of these solid paint jobs. This is a Lucky Strike G5 wiggle wart knockoff. It's actually a really good bait. Catches a ton of fish for me. And here's a little, I don't know what this is. I think it's a Strike King or a Bandit or something, but you get the idea. It's just crawfish patterns. Your greens, your browns, your translucent colors, and some of that clear water are going to work extremely well. Jig bite, you want to use a little bit lighter line. I'm a big jig guy, and usually I've got 20-pound line, and I'm using a little bit bigger rod. Here I've got 20-pound line this is my Carbonlite Johnny Morris Signature Series technique specific rod. This is 7'4" heavy, and I usually throw 17 to 25-pound line on that. I've got a little bit heavier jig on here. This is 7/16 ounce, and this is actually a heavy jig too. This is actually just a little Hayabusa jig head that I just tied the skirt on, and just put a real finessey skirt. And as you can see, this one's got 12-pound line, which is really kind of what you want in the wintertime. I've downsized the rod, 7'2", medium heavy. It's got a lot of tip to it. 12-pound line, still a high-speed gear ratio reel from Bass Pro Shops, real low profile. This is also a Carbonlite, 8-to-1 gear ratio. But basically, you want to lighten up your setup in the wintertime. Lighter line is going to get you a lot more bites. And then on your jigs, I usually like a full-size jig, and don't get me wrong, I'm still throwing my big 5/8, 3/4, half-ounce jig, full skirt. But this smaller profile skirt, I've got it on both of these jigs here that I'm throwing right now, is just going to get more bites in the wintertime. Fish are a little bit more lethargic. They're eating small crawdads. That more natural fall that you're going to get, and that action that you're going to get with that lighter line is just going to put a few more fish in the boat. They bite the jig a lot lighter this time of year. So having that smaller jig with a lighter hook in it is going to help you get better hook sets, catch more fish, and a few more bites. So both of those Bass Pro Shop rods, heavy action rod with heavier line. Bass Pro Shops 20-pound fluorocarbon on some of your heavier stuff, fishing deeper, dirtier water. But most of the time, I'm going to use that like medium heavy action rod a little bit lighter line, 12 to 14 pound Bass Pro Shops fluorocarbon. And the jig size is anywhere from 5/16 when you want a really slow fall, fish in shallow water. I'm gonna use that usually like 8 foot or less for sure. And then if you're fishing out a little bit deeper, I'll offer more of that 7/16 ounce, half ounce, get it down there on the bottom. And, you just want to feel the bottom. Maintain contact with the bottom is the biggest key. So crankbait, jig, those have been great options, especially if you don't have live scope. If you just want to go out there, cover a little bit of water, set the hook on a few. I love setting the hook on them. So a jig is a bait, you can do that. And it's a great way to catch them this time of year, especially overcast days, a lack of wind. Really, when you're not getting them to chase that jerk bait or that A-rig down, the jig is a really good option to catch them. The crankbait, I'm more fishing open banks with it, secondary points, channel banks, just trying to cover some water, throwing it in areas where I can hit the bottom, and I'm just using a slow retrieve. I got a 6:3-to-1 gear ratio reel on that, 12-pound line, and fishing it slow on the bottom and just covering water. That's what it's all about. Chasing the wind can be key. You get some of these windy days, it'll get some fish stacked up on some of those windy banks, just feeding, but it's a good bait. And right now, normally you're fishing it on some steeper banks, but right now we've got a lot of water in the lake. Let's just say that the water is up from what it normally is. Normally we've got some winter drawdown happening right now, and the water's falling. So normally we've got some fish, kind of using some current situations or just utilizing that water depth that's on some of these banks. But right now, a lot of the fish are roaming flats because, we could really, by the time, we get to March, there's going to be 3 foot less water in here at least. So, and that's going to help position some fish on some of those deeper banks. But if I can grab this Alabama rig, I'll show it to you. Alabama rig's been a key player. We've been throwing all sorts of sizes of swim baits on it, but that's been, I'd say like if I was in a tournament, of course I'm going to have a jig, a crankbait. I'm going to have all of them on my deck, jerkbait. But the Alabama rig has been a big player. And as far as that goes, I've been throwing it on, this thing's all tangled up. I'm trying to untangle it for you, but that's it. Well, I've been throwing a variety of swim baits on here. This is, I believe, a 3/16 ounce Bass Pro Shops jig head. And I'm just throwing a good solid jig head on there, anywhere from an 1/8 ounce to 1/4 ounce, just depending on how deep you want to get that A-rig and how fast you want to fish it. It's been deadly for the big largemouth. It's been deadly for the big hybrids and white bass. But you're basically just throwing this around, cover, and using a slow retrieve. I'm throwing it just to kind of cover some water, see where the fish are at, see if I can draw some fish off the bottom or maybe around some brush piles that I couldn't see, and really using it to just be efficient. And a lot of the fish come up and look at it, they'll nip at it. Of course, a windy day is best. Early in the mornings, late in the afternoons, you can get them to commit to it a lot better. Not getting a ton of bites on it, but catching some fish. And I've got, and catching big fish, catching 4, 5, 6 pounders on it. Although we have caught a few of those bigger fish recently on a jerk bait, that bite's picking up a little bit as well. Bass Pro Shop Speed Shad, the 3.8, the bigger Speed Shad has been a better bait, catching bigger fish on it. And again, I'm just adjusting the color and the sizes just according to the water I'm fishing. So shallower water, I'm going to lighten up the A-rig, 1/8 ounce heads, 16th ounce heads. And that bigger swim bait will lighten it up too, let it ride a little bit higher in the water column. Of course, here in Missouri, 3 hooks, and then you get 2 dummy baits. So as you can see here, I've got one that just fell off of there, but I've got on one of those arms, usually it's your top arm on that on the A-rig, but you've got a screw lock here, and you're just gonna screw a swim bait into the end of that without a hook. And so you're gonna have 2 dummies, 3 hooks, and usually 25-pound Bass Pro Shops fluorocarbon, 6/8 to 1 or 7 to 1 gear ratio reel. I want to be able to, kind of that middle size on the gear ratio, I guess you would say. I don't want a real slow gear ratio, but I want something that's slow enough where I can keep the bait at the proper pace, but also when I get a bite, I can kind of take up some slack, fight the fish, get him to the boat, get good hook sets. So that 7 to 1 gear ratio reel seems to be a good, or 6/8 to 1 just seems to be a good model for that. But 20 to 25-pound Bass Pro Shops fluorocarbon, and then I've got a big Bass Pro Shops Johnny Morris Signature Series 7'6" rod on there. So I like the fluorocarbon 20, 25-pound line. Seem to get a few more bites on it. I would prefer to throw braid, and if we get a little more stain in the water, I'll probably start back on the braid. But I just feel like they're getting a good look at it. They're a little timid anyway. So that braid, I feel like I'm getting a few less bites. But I like the hookups on braid. I catch more when fish on it that come up and bite it. So when they actually commit to the bait, try to bite it, you can usually just kind of wind them on the braid. And I try to set the hook probably a little bit too much on the A-rig in general, especially with the fluorocarbon. But A-rig's been working good. White bass, hybrids, you name it, they've been biting it. And it's gonna continue to produce. My favorite bait to throw this time of year though is a jerk bait. I've been throwing a lot of different kinds, a lot of different color variations, just trying to get, sometimes there's just that one that seems to get all the bites. Haven't found that. I've been throwing this Bass Pro Shops XPS Stare Down 110, a little bit deeper model on a lot of these fish. They're hanging tight to the bottom, so I'm trying to get the bait down there. This 110 plus 1 is actually like a slow sinking model. We got one here in the package. That's like a Pro Blue, but it slowly sinks. It's a great bait. Been catching a lot of crappie and bass on this one. But that's a Table Rock shad color. Was throwing that yesterday. Had a lot of good success on it. But really good bait. Gets down a little bit deeper, and it gets down there quicker, which I like too, especially if you see, maybe a fish on live scope. You can throw it out there, achieve the depth really quickly and get it in front of that fish. Gives you just a few more options. Also, that longer bill on there we've got a ton of brush in the lake. As anybody knows, it's fished here, tons of brush piles, and that longer bill just kind of helps it go through the brush a little bit better. It'll kind of, nose down, that bait's, that bill is hitting the brush before your hooks are. So it's helping deflect a little bit. But jerk bait's been good, and it's getting better. The crappie bite's been a little slow on it. Normally I can go out there, bass fish, catch a limit of crappie while I'm doing it, and that's a ball. Love doing that. Catching a limit of bass, limit of crappie, same bait, same areas is usually my favorite thing to do. But those crappies are a little bit slow to get back there, kind of suspended. A lot of times the last few years they've been getting in the backs of these creeks, middle of the creeks, and just kind of suspending in big groups. And you can target them. They're real high in the water column. You can target them with that jerk bait. But haven't seen a lot of that yet. Few fish doing that, not those big groups. But that's going to happen. The crappie fishing is just going to keep getting better, and bass fishing is just going to keep getting better. I've caught fish over 5 pounds every single time that we've been out the last few weeks, of course, except when we have a tournament. We had a Bass and Bob deal the other day, and we caught a lot of nice fish. Me and my partner Corey had 17 something pounds. I think we got 6th place, but a lot of nice bags brought in. There was 4 or 5 17-pound bags brought in that day, and we never got that big bite. We had some nice quality, solid fish in there, and which is good to see. So we've been kind of missing some of those 3-pounders, I feel like. We've got a lot of those 2 to 2.5 pounders, and a lot of 4 to 6 pounders. And sometimes tracking those 4 to 6 pounders is pretty hard to do. So sometimes we catch a lot of those 2.5 pounders, which for me, I enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, love catching keepers, but I want to catch some of those big ones. So now's the time to do it. The big ones are biting. Doesn't matter what species you're targeting, the big ones are biting. So like I mentioned before, my guide trips are a little slow, which is really pretty usual this time of year. People are doing other things. It's Christmas, it's the holidays, and they've had a whole year of fishing, so they're taking a break. But now's the time to be on the water. Whether you're catching crappie or bass, or you want to go chase some of these white bass and hybrids, which I've been doing a lot of lately, now's the time to do it. Doesn't get a whole lot better, and the quality's been really good. You can catch the fish of a lifetime right now. You know, if you're a Midwest guy, you know, 5, 6, 7 pounders are big ones, and for a lot of my guide clients, that's probably, you know, a personal best for them as far as bass go. So now's the time to do it. Last trip I had, one of the guys caught a 6-1, so that's a big fish, and they're nice, pretty healthy fish. So I do have some guide trips available. We do have some good weather coming our way. So if you want to go out on a trip, give me a call, send me a message. And this boat that I'm sitting in right here, Nitro Z21 XL, is for sale. I'm gonna make somebody a really good deal on it. I've got a new one coming. This one's loaded up. It's got a stereo. It's got all the Garmin Electronics you could want, Garmin trolling motor, power poles, a sweet battery setup, and it's dialed to the max. It's, you know, everything about this boat is dialed in. I've used it now for a whole season, and it's been flawless from the get-go pretty much. So if you're in the market for a boat, I'm gonna make you a good deal on it if you're interested. So give me a shout on that, and good luck fishing out there. Fish are biting, so if you have a chance, get out on the water and give it a shot. Fishing's been good. So we'll give you another report here in a few weeks.